to me, I don't know, the representation of what occurred of putting the trades down and lifting higher education up was the poster. Talk about the poster and what it meant.
The poster that I made, or the, yeah.
No, the one that they put up in the schools.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the reaction to the first one. Dave's talking about, when I was I was a senior, I took whatever tests you're supposed to take, and I guess I did well on them, and my guidance counselor, Mr. Dunbar, called me to his office to talk about my future. And I only share this because it happened to millions of other kids. And he said, look, you did good on your tests. Here's some paperwork you should look at. Sit down with your folks, James Madison, University of Pennsylvania, University of Maryland. These were all options. They were all expensive. This was 1980, and the only four-letter word in my family that was truly off limits was debt. So there was no way I was going to borrow money to do this. But to your point, Mr. Dunbar, I said to him, look, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't want to borrow money to go in this direction, so I'm going to go to Essex Community College. It's 2 miles up the road. I'm going to major in everything. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to try and figure out if I have any interest at all in any skill. Because right now, if the answer is yeah, I don't know what it is. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, you're wasting your time. Let me show you something. And the poster he pointed to was divided right down the middle. There were two guys on it. One guy was wearing a cap, gown, mortarboard, the whole thing. He had just graduated. The institution was behind him and the sun was rising behind him. The whole world was in front of him. On the other side of the poster was a tradesman in a dark and dingy place, head lowered, holding a wrench, looking very much as if he had just won some vocational consolation prize, right? And underneath the bottom of the poster was a slogan that we've all seen 1,000 times. This is the first time I saw it. And by the way, remember, this is a recruiting poster for higher ed. Thus, the caption on this thing says, work smart, not hard. That was the message my guidance counselor told me, reinforced with a visual aid. And implicit in that moment was, look, if you're not careful, you're going to wind up like that guy. Well, that guy on the right-hand side of the poster looked an awful lot like my grandfather, who built the house I was born in without a blueprint, an electrician, a steam fitter, a pipe fitter, a plumber, my hero. And here he was being essentially epitomized by a loser next to the embodiment of hope, success, and academic achievement. That's how we laid it out. Those posters were all over the country.
Well, they represented a mentality.
Yes.
This aristocratic nose in the air mentality that higher ed was the way to further society, and it was the only way to further society. And what they were trying to do was positive in the sense, but what they were doing was standing on the bodies of the tradesmen to do it.
It goes to Michelle's question. How do you elevate in your company?
You do the opposite of that.
That's right. That's right. But you have to be careful because all PR overreaches eventually. We did need a good push for more kids to consider a 4-year path, but we weren't content to make the case on its merits. We had to turn the trades and everything else, all community college, all trade schools, all apprenticeships, we had to relegate those things into cautionary tales. And I don't want to go too far the other way in an attempt to fix it, but I probably will, because you don't really know where a line is until you step over it. And when I say that, Dave, I simply mean that the evidence demands a verdict. $1.7 trillion in student loans is on the books. We're having a big giant argument over whether or not it should be forgiven. We don't have to go there.
While they continue to make them.
While they continue to make it. Meanwhile, 10 million open positions, most of which don't require a 4-year degree. And here we sit, right here, room full of smart people in 2024. And we all know it. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we're lending money we don't have to kids who are never going to be able to pay it back, to train them for jobs that don't exist anymore. Now that's crazy talk, but we've been doing it for 40 years because that poster and everything it signifies is alive and well in the minds of millions of otherwise well-intended parents and guidance counselors.
You're never going to be somebody if you don't get the 4-year degree. That was the message.
That's it.
And the message is false.
Yep.
And quite the opposite is actually, the verdict is in. Quite the opposite is true. We've got a whole bunch of people who will never be somebody because they got the wrong 4-year degree in the wrong place at the wrong price with the wrong methodology, and it set them up. So again, for those of you listening at home, tune up real careful to the radio, real careful to the podcast. We are not saying 4-year degrees are a bad thing. We're not saying ignorance is a bad thing. We're not saying education as a concept is a bad thing. When it's overpriced and leveraged and people are studying things that are not useful, it is not lifting society. And if in the process of doing that, the only way to do that is to push down the tradesman and make that an invalid thing, then you've doubled down on your stupid at that point.
Back to Dylan's question, technology, all right? When I was in college, I didn't have this thing. And for those of you listening at home, I'm holding up my smartphone right now, all right? This is a tool. We didn't quite know what it is. We still don't. It's a portal, in my view, and it'll take you anywhere in the world. 98% of the known information is available through this thing. That simply means if you have a kid with a curious mind, and that kid wants to master a skill that's in demand but still scratch the curiosity itch, well, that's the liberal arts degree today. I literally watched a lecture 2 weeks ago at MIT on my phone, sitting on the tarmac for free, right? It's all out there. So I think the reckoning that you guys are going to need to contend with in the coming weeks and years is this realization, and this is where we started, right, with Gen Z. They're figuring it out. They know something's wrong. They know something is hopelessly mismatched. The message hasn't been honest. And as the honesty starts to rear its head, there's going to be a mad scramble. And I think you're going to see a new enthusiasm for the trades. There's going to be a scramble to get skilled and so forth. And you guys will have a front row seat to it.
So maybe the answer to her question, the type of PR is, hey, if you want to stick it to the man, if you want to go back, every generation coming up wants to rebel against the formers, right? The best way to do that is to go in the trades.
That's right. But look, again, I think a balanced workforce is like a balanced human. We need two sides of the coin. This gray or this blue collar and white collar modality. The color of collars is changing. All your questions regarding tech prove it. Tech is going to blur white and blue into something gray and purpley. And the most valuable employees you have are going to be people who are intensely curious about all things in the world of liberal arts, but also very, very skilled. These are the people we want. Do you remember during the Republican debate, this would have been 15 or 16, I guess, all 17 are up on stage. I forget what the question was, but Marco Rubio had a great line. He said, what the country needs are more welders and fewer philosophers, right? Crowd goes crazy. I get 300-400 people on my social media saying, hey, this guy's singing your song, right? And I'm like, no, actually, that's not what I mean to say. What I mean to say today is that our country needs more welders who can have an interesting conversation about Descartes or Nietzsche. And we need more philosophers who can run an even bead. We need more balanced people who at least have an understanding that the world is big and beautiful and vast. And if you are fundamentally curious, you are now armed with a toolbox unlike anything we've ever seen in the history of the world. And that too is reason for enthusiasm, I believe.